What's up, everybody? Today I'm going to show you guys how to make this completely custom, completely parametric bolt and nut. Stay tuned. All right, to start this thing out, we're going to go ahead and create a new family. This is going to be a generic model. Both the nut and the bolt are both going to be generic models, and then when we nest these things together, we're actually going to use a face-based generic model, and I'll show you that when we get there. Now, to kind of use as a reference point, we're going to go off of this chart here, and we can go ahead and create several different bolts out of this. We can do a 1/2 inch bolt, 3/8, quarter, whatever that may be. I'm going to save a link to this in the description below so y'all can reference it as well. But we're just going to kind of go off this 1/2 inch bolt right here and use some of these dimensions across here as a reference point while we're creating this thing. Okay, so to start out, we're going to use some of these reference planes. Now these reference planes are going to be what we use to snap our extrusions to and our other objects to. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw a vertical line there. I'm going to mirror it over the middle. We want everything to be centered around this middle axis, this kind of two standard front and back, centered left and right guidelines that they give you with the generic model. I'm going to go ahead and pop a dimension on these two, make these equal, and then I'm going to give it an overall dimension. Now, because we're doing a hex bolt, there's a couple different ways we could do this. I'm just going to show you real quick. We create an extrusion based off of a point or based off of a side. Now, however, even if we did this, these need some reference line to snap to. Otherwise, when you adjusted this, it wouldn't adjust proportionally. So I'm just going to exit out of here, and I'm going to show you how to create some reference points based off that center line. Now, a hexagon, I have 30-degree angles. So I'm going to go ahead and pop a 30-degree angle on here across the center, and then let me just go ahead and give this an overall dimension of A, which is based off that chart. I'll kind of bring it back over to show you. I'm just going to use this as a reference up here. So I'm doing this overall dimension right now, which is A, and we're going to be doing 3 of those. Let's just go ahead and set A to just say 2 feet. I know that's way too big to be a bolt, but we're going to use that as a starting point. So reference plane, and I'm actually going to snap, just to make things easy, 1 foot on either side. Now this is going to start getting a little messy with all these lines, but you'll see what we're doing here in just a second. So again, equal those out, give this an overall of A, just like we did at the top, and I'm going to highlight all this and mirror it over the middle. Now, these are a lot of lines, but you can start to see that hexagon in the center here, and that's our reference point so that this thing scales evenly when we adjust it. So this is a fully parametric bolt that we're creating here. So I'm going to go up to Create. I'm going to do Extrusion, and I'm just going to use this green line to pick lines and make sure that you have a lock. This is really important. If these aren't locked to these lines, then when you scale it, the object's not going to scale with it. So I'm just going to click these outside lines here, and then I'm going to trim it up. So TR for trim, and I'm just trimming all these corners as we go. And you can see now we have a hexagon. It's looking pretty good. And if you see here, if I changed A to 1 foot, it scales appropriately. Now obviously the height didn't change because we haven't set that up yet, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to go to the front. I'm just going to move this up, go AL for a line, and I'm going to snap the bottom to that bottom there. I'm going to create one more reference line across here, and that is going to be our height, which actually in this chart you can see here is H. So I'm going to give that H. And then again, AL for a line, snap the top of that bolt to there. Now you can start to see that this thing's shaping up pretty good. Okay, that you notice too in this chart, it's got a little chamfer along the edge of this bolt, 30 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and set that up as well. Go back to that front view, and we're going to create another reference plane off of this corner. We're going to give that a dimension or an angle of 30 degrees. That's what we want. Beautiful. Now I'm going to create a reference plane out here, kind of in the middle of nowhere. I'll show you why in just a second. I'm going to give that a dimension. I'm also going to just reference that as A, and I'll tell you why. When we do this extrusion, and actually it's going to be a revolve around this center axis, to give that chamfer, this angle has to always be big enough that this bolt doesn't exceed the side. Otherwise, it wouldn't be cutting all the way through. So A is always going to be the same dimension overall. So this triangle will always be at least the size of that nut, which is exactly what we're going for. All right, so I'm going to go back up to create. I'm going to use this revolve command. I'm going to go ahead and do the axis line first. Pick line, again, make sure it's lock, and I'm going to hit that center one right in the middle there. Go back up to the boundary line, pick line, again, make sure lock is checked, and we're just going to pick these 3 lines. We're going to do TR for trim, clean this thing up a little bit, and now we've created this triangle. So over here to the left, you see solid void. This is currently a solid. We actually want it to be a void because right now this just looks like a big donut around this nut. So we want to change this to a void. Click apply, and you can see it's highlighted in orange. And that's just showing that you have a void, but the void's not cutting anything yet. So go up to this cut command, click on the object you want to cut, click on the void that you're using to cut it, and there you go. You have a beautiful little chamfer around that head. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and actually clean up these dimensions a little bit, give these actual numbers something to go off of. So here I'm going with a 1/2 inch thread size or bolt size, whatever you want to reference. So the overall width that I'm going to go with is going to be this 0.75 under the A, and I'm also looking for the H and just following this over. I'm going to go with the 0.323. So A, 0.75 of an inch, H is that 0.323 of an inch. This thing should scale down real nice. Everything's looking really good. The chamfer still stays in contact. I'm actually going to give this a name of, it's going to be a 1/2 inch. And that's referencing the 1/2 inch thread size, which is what we will create next. So going back to plan, I zoom in here, I'm going to create an extrusion. Go up to the circle. You can really do this anywhere if you wanted to. So this is going to be a 1/2 inch, so 1/4 inch. I'm going to give this a dimension, and I'm also change the scale of this drawing so you can see this text. So this 1/4 inch, it's actually, so in this image off to the side, D is the overall body diameter that we're going to go with. That's the 1/2 inch mark that we're going to go with. But right now I am showing the radius, which is going to be half that. So I'm going to create one called little d, and that's going to be the overall radius for the threads that we're creating right now. So I'm going to click on this pink line because I want to snap it to the center, and circles don't really have a flat edge to snap to, but if you go to this center mark visible, you can check that, and it gives you crosshairs in the middle that you can now align. So I can align to that center, lock it in, align to that center, lock it in, and now we have threads that we are creating. So I'm going to go ahead and click that check box, I'm going to go back to 3D. This thing's going to be really tall and outrageous right now. So I'm going to go to front, and I'm going to create the L, which is the length of our threads. So if and I'm going to do this below the reference line. So if I come down here, throw a dimension on it, make sure I'm referencing the actual reference level, give it a dimension of L, we can start locking things in. So I'm going to use the AL for align, lock that, click on the reference line, lock the top, and now L is our dimension of our thread. Again, I'm going to go back up here. Let's just give L 3 inches for now. And again, we talked about that little d being the radius, but I want to see d as the diameter in here. So what I'm going to do is create a d parameter, click OK, and I'm going to make d, little d, half. So d divided by 2. And d is going to be ½ inch. There we go. And I actually like to separate things out. So I'm going to change the location of this, just the group parameter under. I like to keep my equations, if you will, under a general tab so that I can see the difference there. Okay. And now we're looking good. Looks like we got a bolt with a bolt head on it. Last thing to do here is give them a material. So I'm going to go ahead and go over here, add hardware material. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give that the same one, hardware material. Now we're good. We have a bolt and bolt head. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this out. Do a save as family, and I'm just going to save it to my desktop here. And I'm going to call this bolt. Save. Now I'm going to create the nut very similar to this, and I'm just going to use this same family so we don't have to recreate anything. So I'm going to go back to the front view, and L is no longer needed as we are not having a bolt or a thread length here. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go and delete the L parameter. We don't need that. Click OK. But I'm still going to use this extrusion. So now this extrusion, I'm just going to reference and align it to this top here. And I'm going to turn this solid into a void. Go back to 3D. You can see that again. It's not cutting anything yet. And I'm just going to click on that nut, click on that void, and now we have a nut. Now, one little thing, a little detail that I want to see in here is I want to see that chamfer on the bottom as well. So we have this guideline. We need to create another reference plane off of this bottom corner. Again, we want it to be at that 30-degree mark. So I'm going to give it another angle, 30 degrees. I'm going to lock that in. Not sure if I locked that. Locking is key. We always want to lock so that when parameters are adjusted, they adjust correctly. So I'm going to find this void that we have going on here. And I'm going to go up to Edit, Revolve, and I'm just going to add a few more lines to it. Again, go back to that green line, the pick lines, make sure we're locked. Lock on that new angle we created, lock on the baseline there. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. Click check, and now we have a nut with the chamfers on both ends. Looks pretty good. Okay, and then I'm going to do a file, save as, family. I'm just going to create nut, click save. Now, like I said, we have both of these families created. I'm going to go ahead and open up that bolt family that we just made. So we have the bolt open and the nut open. And now I'm going to create one more family. Now this new family is going to be a face-based generic model. And the reason I'm doing a face base is that I want this bolt and nut to be able to change planes depending on what you are putting this bolt on. If you're putting it on a wall or a floor or a joist or a beam, we want to be able to attach it to the surface of that. And if you just created another generic model that we nest these things into, you won't be able to rotate it in all those different axes. So now I'm going to go ahead and go back to the bolt family. I'm going to load it into our new family. And this is nesting families together. So I'm going to just quickly align this to the center. Go to the front here. You can see it's not attached to that, but I'm going to associate it to that. So I'm just going to hover over this. Make sure you're clicking on that reference line, not the surface. Locking it in there. Click check. Okay, now that bolt is locked in. Now I'm going to create a reference line real quick. Now this reference line is going to be dimensioned to this reference level. And this is going to be the space that we have for the exposed thread, or the thickness of whatever you're bolting together. Go back to the nut family. I'm going to load that into the new family as well. Going to align it, lock it, go back to the front. You can see that nut is floating in space. So now I'm going to lock this nut to this line. I'm going to call this thread length. Click OK. And now I have to nest these parameters, because right now if I opened up the family types, the only thing I have in here is thread length. So let's say I made this 5 inches. That bolt doesn't adjust with it yet, right? So what we want to do is nest our parameters together. So I'm going to click on the bolt, I'm going to go to edit type, and I'm just going to nest these things over. So I'm going to first, let's just go down the line. We'll go to hardware, material, click OK. I'll click on create new A. Again, I'm just keeping these same lingo so I know what's what. D, go to H and L. Okay, I'm just going to do the same thing for the nut, so that if we adjust this bolt dimensions, the nut adjusts with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do A, D, H. I'm going to do that hardware material as well. Okay, one last thing. We want to set up L to be an actual calculated. So I'm going to change this to general. I like keeping those things separate. But what I want L to be is it's going to adjust based on this thread length. So that thread length is always going to be 5 inches. I want L to be the thread length plus the thickness of that nut, which is going to be H, plus, let's say, a 1/2 inch reveal. So that 1/2 inch reveal is actually going to be how much it sticks past that nut. Now, actually, maybe we want that to be its own parameter. Maybe we don't always want it to be a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new parameter. I'm going to call it thread reveal. And so I'm going to change this last bit of the equation to thread reveal. And make sure that when you're doing equations like this that you're spelling it the same way, you have the same capital letters, otherwise you're going to get an error. So let's change this thread reveal to 1/4 inch. See that changed right there. Beautiful. So now we have a face-based bolt and nut. It acts appropriately. I'm just going to save this as bolt family. Okay, clean these things up. I'm actually going to go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to test this out real quick. Let's make a wall. I'm actually going to create a floor as well. Looks good. Let's see, how thick is this thing? 8 inches. Well, let's go ahead and make this 8 inches as well. I'm just showing you this for reference. Okay, so I have a wall and a floor. If I go back to our face-based family, I'm going to load this in to that new project. And now I can go to 3D and I can place on face, place it on the wall, place it on the floor, and you can see that bolt sticks. Just got to change the depth. We had it set at thread length 5 inches. Change it to that 8-inch depth of that wall. Beautiful. Now you can see, looks like it's bolted all the way through that wall. Same with the floor. Fantastic. Our next video is going to be taking this bolt family we made today and nesting it inside of a custom parametric column family. That column family is going to have built-in footers, built-in saddle notches, built-in trim, fully parametric, so stay tuned and we'll catch you next time.